So, dear friends, when we celebrate Mass, that's exactly what we should be doing, celebrating. So it should always be a joyful and hope-filled experience, even though it brings together the tragedy of the cross, if you will. It also brings the glory of the resurrection. It brings our sinfulness. We begin every Mass confessing that we're sinners, we're flawed, we're fallen, we're broken, we're wounded. But it also brings together the mercy of God, the goodness of God, the infinity of God's grace. So Mass brings together an awful lot of things that shouldn't really fit, but it somehow makes them work. That we can bring our inability, our imperfection, to the presence of God the perfect, and then He makes up for what we lack. So what I'm saying is Mass should always be life-filled, hope-filled, joy-filled, celebration. And we have to maintain that, along with the fact that out there in the world, it can be very, very difficult. It can be very, very challenging. It can be very difficult to hold on to hope. Very difficult to hold on to hope. I came across some statistics there recently where it said back in 1965, there were 1,400 seminarians in Ireland. So back in 1965, 1,400 seminarians. Now there are 26 or something in around that. It's about 1.5%. 1.5%. We'll call it 2%. Let's be generous. We'll call it 2% of the seminarians we had in 1965. 2%. Now, that's a collapse by any standard. We also had, I think, even when I was young, we had 9 seminaries in Ireland. Now there's 1. There's been an outright collapse of priestly vocations in Ireland. A priest friend of mine was at a launch of a pastoral plan, diocesan pastoral plan there a couple of years back, and those who had been invited to this particular launch were priests, religious, and members of parish pastoral councils. So there must have been 250, 300 people there, he was saying. And at one point then, a lady put her hand up and said, "Look, when are we just going to address the elephant in the room?" And the priest who was guiding the whole thing said, "Which particular elephant are you referring to?" He said, "Well, look," she said, "clearly there aren't any priestly vocations, or clearly men aren't deciding to become priests, so when is the church going to decide to ordain women?" And then an applause began. And this priest looked around, and again, who's there? Priests, religious, and parish pastoral councils. Looked around and saw about 2/3 of the people applauding for the ordination of women. Now, I have nothing against women, I think they're great. But when it comes to the ordination of women, like, this is firstly decided by Jesus himself, so we can't change it. Secondly, it's 2,000 years of Christian tradition, which we can't change. And then the priest said something along the lines of, "Well, we can't change that." And then she said, "Well, why can't we just petition the Vatican, get the bishop to petition the Vatican?" And he said, I couldn't help but think, we seem to have no understanding of how the church works, or of how fidelity to church teaching works, or of how Christian tradition, sacred scripture, form what we believe, not what the opinion of the majority is at any particular time in history. That's not what forms what we believe. And he said, it just struck him at that moment. It's hard to hold on to hope. It's hard to hold on to hope. In his encyclical, Pope Benedict wrote a beautiful line, which he says, "Those who hope live differently. Those who hope live differently." It's a beautiful line from Space Salvi. The one who has hope lives differently. The one who has hope has been granted the gift of new life. So with hope we live differently, and the absence of hope then is a lot of what we see today. If you have no hope, then why try? Then why bother? Then why live? Why continue? And this is what we see then, like this epidemic of hopelessness, of sadness, of people giving up, of depression, of swaths of people on antidepressants because just daily life is too difficult. So hope is something we must hold on to. in the church. Hope is something that we as Christians, as we as Catholics, must be witnesses to. So people should see us, who have faith, who live by faith, and see they have something that we don't. What is it? I was thinking, watching a debate on RTE recently about the eulogies, and that whether eulogies should take place in the context of Mass or not. And just some of the comments made by one particular priest, anyway, were just so difficult to hear as a priest, because he was asked, well, is the funeral liturgy, is it about commending that soul to God, or is it about, the consolation of those who listen? The journalist asked. And he said, well, it's about both, but the second one there is more important, just for the consolation of the living. And I thought, well, it's like, that's just made up. It's not just for the consolation of the living. The Holy Mass is being offered for the deceased and for those who grieve, but it's being offered primarily for the deceased. And then he said, and we have to be careful as well, because we have an awful lot of people in Ireland now who aren't Christian at all, don't belong to any particular faith, so we have to keep that in mind as well during our celebrations. No, we don't, actually. No, we don't. I don't have to think, well, if there's a Muslim in the church here, I have to change how I celebrate Mass. Absolutely not. Like, what is the centre of Mass? Jesus. So this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to celebrate Mass, basically, as we've learned in seminary, or it's kind of a saying amongst priests. If it's in black, you say it. If it's in red, you do it. Voila. Just be faithful to what's there. And then, yes, in the homily, of course, it's very clear, even in the general instructions, Roman Missal, that the homily should be Christ-centered. Christ-centered. Now, of course, you can mention, who's there and a little something about them, but the homily is not about them. No, it's nothing against them. But because we love that person so much, we want to offer the best prayer, the greatest prayer that we have for the happy repose of their soul. And so the best thing that we can do is celebrate Mass as reverently, as devotedly, as Christ-centeredly as we can. Offer this prayer to God the Father for the salvation of their soul. That's the best thing we can do for them. And we as priests need to be confident about that. So it's something very, very beautiful that we get to do. But I couldn't help but thinking, this is a kind of a strong statement, but sure, look, we're all friends. But I was thinking about that kind of attitude towards the faith. Like, sure, look, once you're trying, once you're doing your little bit, a very common kind of thing to hear in Ireland. Once you're trying, sure, you haven't killed anyone. Sure, once you're trying at all, sure, look at. Sure, once you have the bit of spirituality. Bit of spirituality, what on earth does that mean? I used a Ouija board once, is that a bit of spirituality? Like, what's a bit of spirituality? What does that even mean? Where does Jesus say, sure, once you have the bit of spirituality, you're grand? He says, it's not those who say, Lord, Lord, who enter the kingdom of heaven, but those who do the will of my Father. That's what Jesus says. And else is made up, So we have this kind of superficial attitude to liturgy, superficial attitude to our whole faith, superficial attitude to preaching and teaching in the church. And I would argue this has done more damage in the church than Oliver Cromwell. Like that kind of superficial, blasé, laissez-faire attitude to the faith has done more damage in the Catholic Church, in Ireland at least, than Oliver Cromwell. With his armies and torches and muskets and killings. We're doing more harm in the church today through that spineless, grey, blasé attitude than that kind of violent opposition. Because that kind of rot happens from within, and it happens slowly, just by degrees. You don't really need to go to Mass all the time. You don't need to go to Mass every week. You don't need to pray all the time. Sure, a little bit of sin did no one any harm. Sure, look at and then just little by little, the old standard gets dropped until you compare it to a family or a country or a parish or a nation that lives the faith well. Like you go along to Sikh or something, and you see what it looks like when a lot of people live the faith well together, and you go, wow, okay, we have fallen. We really have fallen. So, hope. Through all of this, we have to hold on to hope, which is very interesting and not easy. I was just thinking this morning, like, what does Scripture say about hope? So in Romans 8:24, for in hope we are saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? I don't have to hope that I have my phone. I see it. It's here. I don't have to hope. That's not hope. That's just stating a fact. Whereas hope, by its very definition, by its very nature, means to believe that we will receive things that we do not have. Believe that we will receive what we do not see. So hope means walking into the unknown. And for many of us, again, if you've been beaten back by life a lot, walking into the unknown will be terrifying, because the known is bad. What your life might be kind of difficult or painful. So walking into the unknown might get even worse. So maybe I'll just stay where I am, even though it's pretty bad where I am. Maybe there is worse. And you find this often in people's relationships. It might be in an abusive relationship, but they'll say, yeah, but at least there's some sort of familiarity or security. And if I leave this person, I might find someone worse. So I'll just stay in this bad relationship, in this bad situation. That's a complete absence of hope. Absence of hope. Hope is gone. So hope, by its very, very definition, this is where also as a church, so as individuals and as a church, we have to be willing to move when the Lord asks us to move, and move in the direction the Lord is asking us to move. So that will mean moving from where we are, which in Ireland, for example, as regards the church, is a system stuck in the 70s. We're doing exactly the same things now that we did in the 70s, unchanged, even though the culture, mass attendance, vocation numbers and everything have radically changed, but we're still doing exactly what we did back then as regards baptismal preparation, as regards sacramental preparation, general marriage preparation is all as it was in the 70s, even though now couples aren't attending Mass regularly, probably cohabiting. So they're in a very different cultural situation, but we're preparing them for the wedding ceremony or for their life together over a weekend. That's how marriage preparation works in Ireland, just as it did in the 70s. So that means also moving from where we are into, yes, something that might be kind of unknown, but not. It's not reckless. You're not just running aimlessly into the dark. But we're aiming to be guided by the Lord to fulfill His will, which means, yes, move from where you are. But, as I say, not recklessly, not aimlessly. We're not just jumping ship. That's a different kind of a thing. We're walking in hope into the unknown. But by degrees, by steps. We're not, as I say, running aimlessly. What does the Lord want? What does the Lord want us to do to better prepare people for any or every sacrament? What can we do? What is the Lord asking us to do here? What can we do better? How can we best support existing priests so that they can hold on to hope? Does that mean that they won't be able to do as much as they are doing? Yes, it means they will not be able to do as much as they are doing. But if in doing what they're doing, they begin to lose hope and lose the joy of their priesthood, you're just furthering and accelerating the demise of the church. And that's, again, another strong term, but what do we see here? We're seeing the demise of the faith in Ireland. It is dying. So we need to turn this around, and we can. We can. Why? Because the Lord is enough. The Lord is enough. The Lord actually has a plan. The Lord can actually renew the faith in any country, in every country, if we're willing to do what He asks. If we're willing to move, can He guide us out of this? Of course He can. He's God. Are we willing to move, though? The problem is never on God's side. The problem is never, is there enough grace? The problem is never, is there a plan? The problem is that when there is grace, wonderful and all as it is, when there is a plan, we're not willing to move. We're afraid. We lack hope. And then everything just stays stuck, even though we know we're careering right towards the rocks. We won't change. Now, this is never, just to be clear, this is never about changing doctrine. We don't need to change doctrine. There's nothing wrong with the teaching of the church. Don't, like this synodality thing, unfortunately it seems to be kind of hijacked by those who want to change doctrine, who want to change what we teach. This will change nothing. It'll actually just make things far worse. If we change what the church teaches, then we're taking upon ourselves a role or a responsibility that we do not have. The Pope can barely change church teaching. He can change some certain things, but he can't just come in and change what people want to change wholesale. Even the Pope can't do that. We can't do it. Democracy can't do it. So that's not where hope lies. That is not where the future lies. It's not about changing doctrine, but it is about changing how we present the beauty and joy of our faith, which can only be done through fidelity. So if I'm faithful to what the Lord teaches, if I live what the Lord teaches, if I allow this to primarily change me, then my joy, my hope, my love will be magnetic. The joy, hope and love of our family will be magnetic. The joy, hope and love of our parish will be magnetic. The joy, hope and love of our diocese, hopefully our country, will be magnetic. People will want what we have. And in the meantime, we must hope for this. Hope. Never give up. Never give up that the Lord has a plan. Never give up that conviction. For in hope we were saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope. What does that mean? That means that our hope, in part, is unseen. Now, that's something to get excited about. That's something to get enthusiastic about. That means that the solution and the healing isn't seen yet. But it's coming. It's coming. So we can be hopeful. We can be excited. Like a 6-year-old on Christmas Eve. Like we can really look forward to what the Lord is going to do. And when he reveals it, if we're willing to do what he reveals, absolutely there'll be renewal. Countries have gone through this before. We can do this if we hope in obedience. So we ask the Lord today to help us to continue to hope for that which is unseen and to grant us that docility to do what he asks us to do when he asks us to do it. Amen.